Hello budget people, and welcome back to another episode of the She's on a Budget podcast. My name is Euphemia and I'll be your host. I'm on a mission to deliver jargon-free money advice to help you fast-track your way to financial freedom. In today's episode, I'll be joined with Winnie Anna Forson, Head of DEI, Mumtrepreneur and advocate for people from underrepresented groups. So thank you so much for joining me on the She's on a Budget podcast. First of all, Winnie, would you be able to introduce yourself and let us know what you actually do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I wear quite a few hats, but I'll start with my professional hat. So I'm a head of diversity, equity and inclusion in the logistics and transport world. I've only been in this industry for about, not the diversity industry, the logistics and transport industry for 3 months, 3.5 months. But prior to that, I had 11 years in banking, working across various HR, leadership, learning roles before starting in diversity, equity and inclusion. I'm also, I like to call it mumpreneur. So I'm a mum of 2, but I also side hustle. And a lot of my side hustles are about helping people from underrepresented groups succeed. So hugely passionate about diversity, and that extends to the work I do outside. A lot of that is around consulting, coaching, underrepresented groups, running events. And I also have very randomly a business selling journals, planners, stuff like that. So that's me in a nutshell.
Brilliant. You definitely wear many, many hats, and I love to hear it because, as you know, I try to gain as many hats as I can for myself. But yeah, I would really, really like you to share some of your experience, especially when it comes to your mumtrepreneur kind of view on things, your experience in financing and HR experiencing, and hopefully to help people who are maybe looking to further their career, increase their pay, and how they can actually go about doing that. So yeah, that will be really, really helpful. So first of all, what does the head of DEI do? What is your role? What does it entail?
It's so interesting because I get asked that all the time. People either know lots about DEI or nothing. So for anyone who's not aware, DEI stands for diversity, equity and inclusion. And it's all about trying to get better outcomes for people from underrepresented groups. So essentially what that means is, especially in the context of a company, I lead the agenda at my company where I create and define a strategy for the business, help them understand how to attract more females, more people from ethnic backgrounds, more people from different age demographics, more people from the LGBT plus community, more people from the disability community. And then I also do quite a lot of work around engaging our colleagues. So how people feel comfortable to bring the different dimensions of their difference to work. How do we create an environment where there is no bullying, no harassment? People don't feel like they are treated any differently or badly because of their identity. And I've probably oversimplified that.
No,
But
that's brilliant.
that's
a really, really good explanation. I think it's definitely for me, when I first learned about your job role, or one of your job roles, I did have to look it up. So I was like, DE who? And then I looked it up, I was like, okay, yes, no, I know exactly what she does now. We have spoken in the past about this, but it is definitely something that I suppose has recently taken off, that type of job role. Can you explain why that is the case? Why is there a recent uproar, or shall I say, or increased jobs in DEI? Why is that?
That's actually a really good question. So I've probably been dabbling in this space for about 11 years in different guises. And what I have seen is that over those 11 years, there's often a bit of a spike in attention in this space, usually driven by world events that happen. So when I first started working in diversity, equity and inclusion, a lot of the dialogue was around millennials in the workplace. So it was back then when millennials was just starting to work and people like, oh my God, these people are so different. They don't want to work in companies for a long time. What do we do with them? Which is now funny thinking about Gen Zs because it's the same response everyone is having, if not worse. And then there was a massive thing around race. I don't know if anyone remembers, weirdly, when Big Brother happened and there was this massive thing with
Yes, I do remember. And there was
a big thing about race, but from the the lens of Asian people in the UK and their inclusion. And then there was a big spike around women and women's rights and gender inclusion. So I've seen that there's been almost like peaks and troughs. But over the last 2 years, the tragic murder of George Floyd really ignited a dialogue around race, specifically for Black people, Black inclusion, injustice. And I think it's a really important conversation. But what that means is that more companies, once again, have started to think about making sure that there are people driving this agenda for them and looking at race more specifically as well.
Yeah, which I definitely agree is really, really important. That's really interesting, I think, to see when the peaks and the kind of like troughs occur. And I think it's just also helpful, for people to keep in mind that these actual events do have an impact on job role, job availability, and things like that. So definitely being up to keeping your knowledge up to date, keeping your eyes on the times will kind of help impact you in terms of trying to increase your income and even like maybe changing a whole different job role altogether.
Absolutely.
In your opinion, has diversity within the workplace actually improved? We've said that there have been peaks and troughs, but do these real life events genuinely have a long-term effect or long-term impact on the diversity, equity and inclusion of people in the workplace?
I think that's a really good question because, like I mentioned, there's often a spike for a specific group, and it's funny. My colleague has a term for this. Not my colleague at the company I work for now, but my previous company. She calls it diversity Olympics, where it's almost at one point in time, one group gets so much attention, and then everybody gets upset, and they're like, "What about me? What about me?" So it's very interesting because I've seen a really mixed response. I think it's made a massive difference, mostly because we're talking about topics that were not, I guess, at the forefront of discussion to begin with. And I think that's why this role is so important because a lot of the times DEI feels like a nice to have for people. It feels like a touchy-feely, soft topic, when actually it isn't. Businesses are more likely to succeed if they have diverse senior leadership teams. That's been proven statistically. So I think what it's done is brought that dialogue to the fore. It's helped people to understand why DEI is a massive catalyst for business success, why it's good for our society, not just because it's a nice thing to have. On the flip side, though, I think when these issues are brought to the fore because of topical events, there is the danger that it's a topic for a day and then it starts to trail down. And I think that's the fear that I'm having now. I'm starting to see that. I actually saw an article last week that said that companies are now advertising for less DEI roles than they did in 2020, for example, when George Floyd was murdered. So there's a lot more to be done to sustain this space and sustain the importance. But it's so nice to be having conversations now that we didn't 3 years ago or 4 years ago.
Yeah. I definitely think that I have seen that for myself. When I first opened my shop back in 2020 or 2019, 2020, I did see an increase in, shop owners, especially within the Etsy space, to draw in Black custom, or they would be seemingly making things that were to represent Black people more, whereas I think that is definitely like changed over. No one needs to kind of like wear that hat anymore. If a company, I suppose, constantly has someone within that role, then they don't have to worry about the peaks and troughs. It can just be that is just what you do, rather than just bring it in just for a season. Let's change gears slightly. In a recent TikTok that I saw from yourself, I did see that you were talking about something that really like touched me, because it is definitely one of the things that I am consistently trying to work on. And it's something that you call the judgmental voice. I think that you spoke about reading something, and you spoke about things that you're trying to do now to help kind of like limit that or lower that judgmental voice that you feel that we all have. So could you explain that a bit to us? What is the judgmental voice and how do we go about keeping it a little bit more quieter?
I really have a lady called Susie Ramroot to credit for this concept, because she wrote a book called Be the Leader You Want to See, which is one of my favorite books in the world. Anyone who knows me really well, the minute I mention the book, they're like, oh, here Winnie goes again with that book. because it's so good. It's such a good book. And basically, it's a great book for mostly women, actually. The whole premise of the book is how women are very comfortable being in the second in command position. So we're comfortable being like a chief of staff instead of a CEO, or we're happy to be the number two rather than the business owner or business leader, and how to break some of that imposter syndrome and create more comfort being at the top. And she goes into many micro concepts, but one of those is the judgmental voice. And she basically says that when you see someone and you, even if it's in your head and you don't say it out loud, but you think something about them that's negative, what it does is it practices using that negative judgmental voice on yourself. So she basically says that every time you use that voice, you're nurturing it. So it doesn't even have to be out loud to make it count, but it could be, oh, that's an interesting outfit that person's wearing. I can't believe you're brave enough to wear that here. Or it could be anything like, oh my God, this person's handwriting is awful. And they might be tiny little comments that we make. But what we're doing is practicing that voice, so it becomes a lot easier to use that voice on ourselves. So it might be, why are you doing your makeup like that? You look terrible. Or it could be, oh, there you go again, posting on LinkedIn. Nobody cares about what you have to say anyway. And what Susie was saying is, if we can flip that voice, I'm oversimplifying what she says. Definitely read the book.
No,
She
you're definitely
explains
explaining it really well.
But basically what she says is practice turning that voice into a positive voice, speaking back to it, so that in turn you end up speaking positively to yourself. And that's so important.
Where do you think the judgmental voice comes from? We've spoken about this before, but you said that you feel like you've kind of like named your judgmental voice, and you feel like it's a accumulation of several people. Where do you think the judgmental voice initially comes from?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important to talk about, and I'm an ICF accredited coach. So I actually did a specific coaching qualification called Mastering Your Power. Anyone can sign up to do it. It's really good. It's a coaching qualification specifically for people who want to coach people from underrepresented backgrounds. So it's
Right.
the diversity lens. And one of the concepts we talked about on that course is that every person has a gremlin. Actually, that concept is from another book called Taming Your Gremlin. I
Okay.
forget who it's written by, so it's worth checking it out if you like reading. But essentially, it says that a gremlin is basically the embodiment of a voice that all of us have. And that voice is often shaped by people around us or past experiences, and that voice is nurtured and grown. So for me personally, when I then did that analysis, I realized that and one thing it says about the gremlin before I tell you how I realized it, the gremlin's actually designed to keep you safe. It keeps you in your comfort zone. So even though it's a critical voice, it's often criticizing big moves, big adventures, right? Because it likes to keep you in your comfort zone. So when I looked at what that voice was for me, I realized it was accumulation of my Ghanaian aunties and mums. And and it sounds really bad when I say it out loud, but the reason I say it is because our parents, well, I should talk about my parents, but they grew up in a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And they had to work really hard for a lot of the things that they had. So often when I speak to you know, my mum, and I'm telling her about some of the big things I'm trying to do, like she's hugely supportive and she always supports me, but sometimes the things I do terrify her. Like she'll be like, this stable job that you've been in for 11 years, Winnie, to go and do a new job. And I'm like, but mom, head overall, like it's great for my career. She's like, yeah, but you know, where you want, it's a bank, they treat you well. One of my aunties used to call me Ma Bank, which like she basically had given me a name based on the job I carried. So a lot of it was around safety. It was put your head down and work hard. You know, visibility is not really a thing for them, right? So for me, looking at that gremlin, it was always like, don't do too much because people will have something negative to say about you. Or just be careful you don't say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, because actually for them that was so important. And for me, the reason, and I do this with all my clients, I help them to identify the gremlin very early on, because when you can identify the accumulation of those voices, you realize that it's not a bad voice. It's actually just a voice trying to keep you safe. And trying to challenge that voice every day is important. So in the
Hmm.
same way, my mum would say, "Well, Winnie, are you sure you want to leave such a stable job to a new job?" I would say to her, "Do you know what, mum? I'm going to
Mm.
sit down and explain to you why I think this is the right move."
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
same way you speak back to that voice. It's, I know it's really scary putting myself out there, but I need to do
Mm.
this because it's the right thing to do.
No, I love how you explain that. It's really, really important. And I think a lot of people can definitely put themselves in that situation and realize or try to hopefully recognize that judgmental voice, and giving it the name, giving it the context that it needs to be put in,
Yeah,
will really help them going forward, definitely
yeah,
very
it's really
wise
important.
words. Yeah, really,
Yeah.
really wise words. Okay, so back to work and jobs, and currently we're experiencing probably the worst recession that most of us have ever lived through.
Mhm.
What would you say in terms of someone watching this show now? They're trying to maybe get a promotion, they're trying to get a better salary. What would you say to someone, especially in the underrepresented groups that you spoke about previously? What would you say to them on tips on how they can actually go about doing that?
I think it's such an important topic, and I love that you're creating the platform to discuss it because I think we're in a time when there's so much bad news. When we look out in the news, it can feel like there's no hope at all. But I
Mm-hmm.
was listening to something recently that said that in recessions, the most millionaires are made, which is
Yes,
insane to me.
it
And
is.
I think it's EasyJet that really peaked in the last recession.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of their business comes from the fact that people actually make less, even though people are trying to save money, they're not necessarily not spending at all. They're just
Yeah,
choosing to spend
where to put their
differently.
money. Mm-hmm.
So I think the first thing I would say is it's so important to be careful about what we consume in a time like this,
Mm-hmm.
because whilst it's a very difficult time, it's also a time when we have to be innovative, come up with new ideas, find new
Mm-hmm.
opportunities. And that's
Mm-hmm.
hard to do when you're so worried and concerned and that there's a lot of negativity out there. So that's
Yeah.
the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is it's important not to view your skill set as something you sell to your employer.
Mm-hmm.
So I always say that your skills are yours. The fact that your company is paying you for your skills doesn't mean they own you and your skills. And I see so many people who are nervous about, I guess, finding new ways to make money from their skills because they think I work for my company and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
it's important to make sure there's no conflict of interest with your company. But
Mm.
I read somewhere that every millionaire has 7 streams of income. So
Mm-hmm.
the advice I always try to give people is identify as many streams of income as you can
Yeah.
from your talent.
Yeah.
So one example I give is, let's say if you're a project manager,
Mm-hmm.
you might be paid at your job, let's say £50,000 a year for being a project manager.
Mm-hmm.
So that's £50,000. And then you think, actually, could I create a project manager book for people who want to learn how to project manage? So that's
Mm-hmm.
two. You might decide you want to create a course for people who don't like reading books and want to
Yeah.
do a Zoom training.
Mm-hmm.
So then you charge for that. You might decide that you want to create project management tools on Etsy, to sell for people who don't want to commit to a whole course.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
we open our minds to our skill sets and what we can achieve,
Mm-hmm.
it actually opens up to so much more opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to bring in income.
I totally agree. And I think I say this myself and advise people this myself when they do come to me and they say, look, I really want to start to earn extra money. My budget is looking trash because I don't have enough money coming in. And I say, if you haven't got a career, if you haven't got a certain job role that has room for progression, what do your friends come to you for? What do they ask you? What would they say your best attributes are? Because that's where you'll find them. If they say, oh, I come to you because you give good advice, hone in on that. What can you do, or what skills could you offer in that area to help other people? So I think that it doesn't matter where you're coming from, what walk of life you're coming from. There's something that everyone has to offer. It's
Yeah.
about just untapping those hidden talents that we definitely all have. So yeah,
So
I
true.
agree.
I think it's so important. And I also think it's important that we look at our careers holistically. So I always say as people, we have portfolio careers, which is a portfolio of interests of things that you're trying to do. So my sister, for example, she's a nurse, but she runs a CMOS business, selling CMOS on the side. Now, you may not put those two things together, but that's a holistic career, you know? Or I have another, my sister-in-law, she makes cakes, but she's a lawyer full time. So you don't have to also create various streams of income from one skill or trade.
Yeah, no, I
Like you
totally
said,
agree.
what do people come to you for? That's your skill.
I think also people underestimate just the power, or not even the power, but I suppose they underestimate what they know. They
Yes,
underestimate that, don't they? So I sit there and I just take for granted that I know X or I know how to do Y. Whereas a lot of people would pay for that knowledge. So,
yes,
you know, knowledge is power at the end of the day. Don't underestimate what you do know. And
yes.
as I said, talk to the people that are around you. Ask them, you know, what have I said in the past, or what, just speak to your family and friends and just see what they would say, and you'll be surprised that they already know what you're good at. It's just that you don't know, you know. So
So true.
definitely like hone in on the people around you and just ask them, just quiz them, and you'll be surprised what people actually come to you for, you know.
So true. I love that.
I do know that you are a Christian like myself. How would you say being a Christian in 2023 impacts your role? You have many hats, as you've said. Does it impact it? How does it impact it if it does?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question because for me, I always say that being a woman of faith is almost like the easy way out. I actually think people who don't have anything to look to must find it harder because I know when I'm going through hard times, when you're juggling multiple hats, sometimes you do feel like there are days when it can all unravel. There are some days where I have a really big meeting or I'm speaking on a big event, and then one of my daughters is sick and then gets sent home, and I have to figure out a way to make sure all the plates are spinning at the same time. And that's really tough. And I find that just on a basic level, my faith is what keeps me sane. The fact
Mm-hmm.
that I can pray about things or cry about things is so important.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, also working in diversity and inclusion, I know not everybody loves the diversity and inclusion space because they sometimes are worried about different facets of DEI that they feel might impact or be against their values when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
faith. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, I see what I do as an extension of sharing God's love with other people. I
Mm-hmm.
know that the God that I serve wants his people to not go to work and feel like they're persecuted at work because
Mm-hmm.
of their identity. So I feel like it's part of my purpose to create inclusive spaces for people, to give people tools to succeed, because I'm a big thing about like your success is almost like a good reflection of God, if you know what I mean. I see Christians living a mediocre life. I'm like, I want people to see your life and see the goodness of God in your
Mm-hmm.
life, because that in
Mm-hmm.
itself is attractive.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm very big on helping people as an extension of the love that I feel I have from God, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely. Oh my gosh, that's so lovely. You know, that is really lovely. I think as well, just hearing you say, you know, you feel like that's what you're called for. There are so many people who are just searching for that calling, like they just really
Yeah.
want to know, what is it that I'm meant to be here for? What am I meant to bring? And it can lead to depression and anxiety, you not knowing that. So you having your purpose or feeling that is your purpose is so valuable in itself. And I saw your TikToks, and I never met you before. Obviously, we live in quite close vicinity to each other, but you can definitely see there's a light in you. Like you definitely resonated, something definitely resonated through to me through your TikToks. And I think that I know it sounds silly, but I think that as a Christian myself, I feel like we see that light within each
Yeah.
other, you know, and it is just so comforting to have that and to share that with other people. So yeah, I definitely
Thank
think that
you.
you're
I
doing
appreciate
God's
you
work, my
saying that.
dear. You're
I
definitely doing
appreciate
God's
you saying
work.
that because sometimes it doesn't always feel like it, especially in a world
Yeah.
where you're just trying to juggle so many things. And yeah, everybody asks themselves questions. So I appreciate you
Mm,
sharing that. And I do think
mm,
you're right about that radiating piece. It should
mhm,
radiate within you. And funny
mhm,
enough, I post a lot on my page because people ask me, like, Winnie, how, do I go into work and tell everyone I'm a Christian? I'm
mhm,
actually against people starting there. And I'll explain why. I feel like
mm,
it's better sometimes not to tell people that you're a Christian and for them to see the fruit in you
mhm, mhm,
than for it
mhm.
to tell than for it is for you to tell people I'm a Christian and then your behavior is completely contrary
I'm
to what
telling
you're
you,
saying.
One of my first videos that I did on YouTube when I was vlogging was about like my routine, and I was showing that I get up in the morning and I read the Bible and do all these things. And today, to this day, that video haunts me. And it's not because it's a terrible video. Like, I definitely, like, it was fine. You know, it's just purely because I don't want people to think that that is just me to a T, like it's my standard and I don't ever slip from it, because I think it is very dangerous in having that as the first thing that people see. So I do agree with you, like that maybe not to start with, yes, I'm a Christian, because then forever you're being judged against that standard, as opposed to you just being who you are. Like, as I said, we've never met before. You know, I saw your TikToks. I definitely saw there was something different about you, and it's definitely resonated through, and it's really comforting to know that you are a woman of faith. So yeah, I definitely think that's the way to go about it, you know?
I often tell people that it's important when we radiate the love of God, but we also need to radiate the grace of God. I'm always telling people, do you know what? I'm God's most difficult, most rebellious child, and he still loves me anyway. So if you hear me doing something untoward or see me doing something untoward somewhere, please don't judge me. Just pray for me and just ask God to look out for me. Because I still think it's important that people know that being a Christian is not about perfection.
And it's not an easy road to walk either. No, yeah, I totally agree with you. So consistency and discipline, I feel, are keys to success in any kind of like facet of life. So whether you are trying to start a debt-free journey, whether you are looking to get a better job. You spoke about this in a recent TikTok. Could you explain to me how you would kind of advise somebody who wants to try to be more consistent, have a bit more discipline? What would you say to those individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, for me, I find being consistent so hard. So it's something that I feel like I have to think about a lot, because you can't be successful without consistency and you can't be successful without discipline. So for me, I always say to people that it's important to look inwardly around what are the conditions that you need to create success. You know, what does success actually look like for you? And what's the best way that you currently stay consistent on whatever journey that you're on? So for me personally, it's things like, and I can give us some examples of that. So some people like a list, some people like accountability. So they want to, you know, meet up with their friend if it's a fitness journey and go jogging together. And that's when they know they'll get it in. So it's important to think about what that means for you. For me personally, I like to create a system that works and makes things easy. So if I need to do a skincare routine, for example, I know if I have a 10-step skincare routine, it's not going to get done because it's too much. But if I can find 2 products that I know work, I need to just put them where my makeup is or where I get ready for the day. It means I look at the things and I will use them that day because I can see it there, right? So for me, it's about if I can see it, it will get done. So it needs to be visible. Or I like to create bite-sized chunks. That's what works for me. So one of the things that I told myself I would do this year is to be more consistent on my faith journey. I didn't want to just go to church to, you know, get my fill of on faith. So I found a way to configure my Bible app so that it would work for me. And then I have my first 15 every morning with a devotional, with a scripture. And then I've got my prayer list in the Bible app. So then I'll just pray through the list. And in that way, I also feel I have high functioning anxiety. What that means is that I have anxiety, but most people just don't know by looking at me, because I'm quite good at just I guess masking it, not showing that I have that. So what that comes with is that I worry a lot. So prayer is how I deal with my worry. If I've prayed about it, then I know I don't have to worry about it. So I can't just be with the wind and be like, oh, I'll just pray about it when I can. By putting it on my list, I
And on
know that
schedule.
I'll pray, I'll pray about it. So I think for me, it's all about looking at what works for you. The other thing that was really important to me, I last year I was really struggling to juggle side hustling, day job, and everything. So I created my own planner. That's how this whole stationery business started. I created a planner where it had a section for my monthly to-do list. So I break down everything I want to achieve in a month. And then I have a daily to-do list section that is a personal to-do list, so life admin, and then business to-do list, which is business admin. So I like to separate the two. when I start explaining this, you can tell I have anxiety, because so many people with anxiety who overthink with the complex that I do. But I
No,
like to
I love
structure
it.
it.
I love it. To be honest, it's really important. And I suppose I've never seen myself as an anxious person. But if you kind of refer to it as that, maybe that's the case, because I find that I become very overwhelmed if I don't write
Mm,
down what I need to do. Like, I have to take it out of here and put it
yes,
down somewhere else.
yes,
And that way I'm able to approach it differently, and it gives me less worry, So yeah, I definitely do that. But I find that if I focus on, 3 things for the day, they are my top priorities. Once those 3 things are done, I'm good.
yeah,
Yes, and then I go on to like the big list or the main list, but I have
yeah.
to kind of like focus on just 3 things a day, and I give my all to each individual thing. So I've worked out that multitasking doesn't really work for me. It just
Mm,
means that I do those 3 things at the same time badly, as
yeah,
opposed to me just focusing on one thing at a time. And yeah, as you said, you've got to do what works for you,
yeah,
find a system that works and kind of like go with that. One thing that I think that we've spoken about before is the fact that, try to make sure your system is yours. Don't look at
yes,
what other people doing. Sometimes I think social media can be dangerous for that, because you look at this girl's 5 a.m. routine, for instance, and you're like, girl, you don't wake up at 5. Why are you waking up at 5? So
right?
we have to really look at what are our most optimum time is for working or approaching tasks. It may be that you're better off, I don't know, cleaning your dishwasher at 12 o'clock at night. Whatever works for you, that's what you have to
Agreed.
do,
It's
and
so
try not to look at
important.
too many other people.
It's
Yeah.
so important. That self-reflection piece is really the key to everything, and looking at
Mm.
what works and trying to improve. I need 8 hours of sleep every single night.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not waking up at 5 o'clock. I think it's lovely when people can do it, but um once I sleep, I can conquer the world, and I don't
Yes.
need a nap in the day because
Yes.
I'm good. So you
Yeah.
always have to know what works for you
You
when
do.
you
You
create
do.
a
You
structure.
do. Definitely, I agree. Oh my gosh. Thank you so, so much, Winnie. Before you go, you have to let us know where we can find out more information about you. If I want to follow you, look at maybe some of your planners, girl, can you let us know your details? Where can we find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to find me is TikTok. As
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm always there. I love doing a good TikTok. I
Yeah.
feel like TikTok gives me like a second life, because I've got my TikTok life and then my LinkedIn life, and I feel like
Yeah.
they're two different things. But
Mm-hmm.
you can find me on TikTok at Winnie and Forsen. You can
Mm-hmm.
also find me on LinkedIn. Actually, I post a lot of content there also around visibility, around thriving as a person from an underrepresented group.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my work in DEI, so it's good to find me there. If
Mm-hmm.
my planner is of interest, it's called the Living Abundantly Planner. It's actually on Amazon, and I purposely did it that way because everyone has Prime. So if
Mm-hmm.
you want to get it, it's easier to get it on Prime. So search on Amazon the Living Abundantly Planner, or it's on my TikTok in my bio.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you again so much. But yeah, guys, that is all for now. I do hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Cheese on a Budget podcast. All details will be kept down below, but I'll speak to you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks for having me.